Roy Moore denied allegations of UAL misconduct at a Veterans Day event in Vestavia Hills, Ayla. Marvin Gentry Reuters Gadsden, Ayla. Roy S. Moore, the embattled Republican Senate nominee in Alabama, moved Saturday to discredit the women who accused him of UAL misconduct, and his party's most powerful figures became increasingly desperate to end a campaign that they worried would undermine their candidates nationwide. Mr. Moore won at least one battle in his efforts to salvage his candidacy. Gov. KIV rebuffed calls that she postpone next month's election, which could leave Republicans with a narrower majority in Washington, but his supporters and detractors alike believed that his campaign remained in jeopardy. People have waited until 4 weeks prior to the general election to bring the complaints, Mr. Moore, 70, said during a Veterans Day event in Vestavia Hills, Ayla, near Birmingham. That's not a coincidence, it's an intentional act to stop a campaign. Mr. Moore has denied the allegations the Washington Post published on Thursday, including that he molested a 14-year-old girl, Lee Kaufman, when he was 32. "I have not been guilty of UAL misconduct with anyone," said Mr. Moore, who added that he has the highest regard for the protection of young children. He won applause at the event on Saturday when he said it was unbelievable that a grown woman would come forward about 40 years after she said the overtures took place, and this close to the election to fill the seat Attorney General Jeff Sessions held until this year. And Mr. Moore, twice effectively removed as the state's ranking jurist, noted that he had long been among the most scrutinized politicians in Alabama. "I've been investigated more than any other person in this country," he said. Although many of Mr. Moore's supporters in Alabama share his fury and have expressed it in far harsher tones, Republicans have been abandoning Mr. Moore since the Post published its article, which included allegations of UAL advances from 3 other women. Beyond the public condemnations of Mr. Moore, some Republicans have been searching for ways to short-circuit his candidacy. Some had favored pressing Marvi to move the December 12 special election. But on Saturday, her office abruptly cut off discussion about the idea. Governor Ivey is not considering and has no plans to move the special election for U.S. Senate, a spokesman, Daniel Sparkman, said in an email. This week, Ms. Ivey said that the allegations were deeply disturbing and that the people of Alabama deserve to know the truth and will make their own decisions. Although Ms. Ivey's decision was something of a relief for Mr. Moore, other Republicans criticized to cut ties with him on Twitter on Saturday. Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee was unsparing. "Look, I'm sorry, but even before these reports surfaced, Roy Moore's nomination was a bridge too far." Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana withdrew his support, he said, based on the allegations against Roy Moore. His response, and what is known, Mr. Moore is a popular figure among many Alabama Republicans, but party officials fear that if he is elected, he will be an albatross around the necks of their lawmakers and candidates nationwide for years to come. In Washington, Republicans pleaded for President Trump, who endorsed Mr. Moore's opponent, Senator Luther Strange, in the primary, to intervene. But taking questions from reporters aboard Air Force One as he flew to Hanoi, Vietnam, Mr. Trump, who himself has been accused by multiple women of UAL harassment, signaled he was reluctant to reinsert himself in the same Alabama race where his endorsement was so thoroughly disregarded in September. "I have not seen very much about it," Mr. Trump said, noting that he had put out a statement through his press secretary on Friday saying that if the allegations were true, Mr. Moore would do the right thing and withdraw. Pressed about the allegations from the 4 women, Mr. Trump declined to say whether he believed the accounts. "Honestly, I'd have to look at it and I'd have to see," Mr. Trump said. "I'm dealing with the folks over here, so I haven't been able to devote very much time to it." Mr. Trump said he was sticking by his statement, which also said that a mere allegation, particularly from many years ago, should not be enough to ruin a person's life. But he did not rule out abandoning Mr. Moore. "I have to get back into the country to see what's happening," he said. Ms. Kaufman said on Saturday that a firestorm of criticism from Mr. Moore's supporters, one of them, a state legislator, suggested that she be prosecuted for lying, had not deterred her. "I stand by my story," she said. A lawyer for Gloria Turdison, who said she had dated Mr. Moore when she was 18 and he was in his 30s, attacked Mr. Moore's speech. "He knows well why these women did not tell what he did to them before this week," the lawyer, Paula Kobier, said in an email. As young teenage girls in the late 1970s, they had no way of knowing the rights, especially against him, considering he was a district attorney at the time. Ms. Kobia demanded that Mr. Moore immediately retract his defamatory statements. Alan Blinder reported from Gadsden, and Jonathan Martin from Washington. Jespit Good contributed reporting from Birmingham, Alabama, and Julie Hirschfield Davis from Da Nang, Vietnam. A version of this article appears in print on November 12, 2017, on page 824 of the New York edition with the headline "Campaign in Peril, Alabama Senate Candidate Tries to Discredit Accusers."